right. Can everybody see that? Can somebody punch that in the chat? Just bear with me for 1 second. I'm not familiar with the software. All right, I'm just gonna keep going and hopefully you all can see my screen. So the Farm Bill, as I mentioned, it's a pretty significant piece of legislation that occurs on a 5-year cycle. It's one of the most important pieces of federal legislation that relates to food and agriculture. It happens on a 5-year cycle, so this 2023 Farm Bill will be the 19th Farm Bill to take place in the US. It authorizes most federal policies that govern food and agriculture programs. So within the Farm Bill, there's different sections, and those sections are referred to as titles. So there are 12 titles in the Farm Bill, and the title that impacts us most directly through our work is the nutrition title, which is Title 4. So I wanted to share a listing of all of the different titles within the bill. You can see that it covers a lot of different areas. So whether that is rural economic development, it goes all the way to energy and biofuels, crop insurance, forestry stewardship, lots of different areas are covered by policy within the Farm Bill. The nutrition title was not always in the Farm Bill. That was first included in 1973, just to give you a little bit of history on that. So in terms of the scope of the bill, you can see that green section of the pie chart is the nutrition title. So 76% of the overall funding in the most recent Farm Bill, which was passed in 2018, was in the nutrition title. So it's 76%, and that was $325.8 billion. The next leading categories were crop insurance, commodities, and conservation funding. So the two main programs that we're going to focus on today that fall within the Farm Bill are SNAP and TEFAP. So we're going to start with SNAP. SNAP is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which provides cash benefits to households on an electronic benefit transfer card or an EBT card that they can use at SNAP eligible retailers for SNAP eligible foods. So the benefit amounts vary by household size and by different calculation rules. So within that, the option within the Farm Bill, we have the opportunity to advocate for who is eligible for SNAP and making sure that there aren't barriers to accessing SNAP. So if you remember the pie chart, a significant portion of the overall cost of the Farm Bill falls within nutrition, and the biggest component of that is the cost of SNAP benefits. So this tends to be an area that is a little bit more contentious during the whole drafting process and getting the Farm Bill across the finish line. It usually has a big target on its back, and unfortunately this Farm Bill is no different. So there are some possible challenges that we're facing. And that's just due to some things that have happened in the recent years. So just some background on where we are, and I'm sure you're all familiar with this. There was the end to the SNAP emergency allotments that took place earlier this year. Additionally, through another legislative vehicle, there was a change to the ABOD requirements, which are going back into effect. So that impacts a very specific population of individuals who receive SNAP. And then also, there was a change to the formula that's used to calculate the benefit amount, and it's called the Thrifty Food Plan. So there was a revision, and that resulted in benefit increases. So as a result of that Thrifty Food Plan revision, and more folks being eligible for SNAP due to economic circumstances, the cost of this program, when you're looking at it in its whole, has increased. So folks in Congress who are concerned about spending levels. You know, they're pointing to that figure and saying, look, this program has grown exponentially, it's costing more money. We need to rein that in. So what that may look like are restrictions on household eligibility. In particular, the thing that we are expecting most is further time limit proposals. So that's obviously something that we are going to have to advocate strongly against. We want to make sure that as many people who are eligible to receive SNAP are accessing it without those barriers. The next program is TEFAP, which is the Emergency Food Assistance Program. Many of you are familiar with it as USDA or those USDA commodities that are available on our menu at the food bank. So the intent of TEFAP is to provide commodities through states and then local emergency feeding organizations like the food bank. And then we in turn distribute those TEFAP commodities to you to make sure that they're getting out onto the tables and into the refrigerators of those households that need it. Additionally, within TEFAP, there are dollars that help to offset the storage and transportation costs that are associated with this program. So you'll see on this slide, I have it broken out of the three main components of TEFAP. So there's mandatory, bonus, and administrative. Under the mandatory piece, that is funding that is required to purchase food. So when I say mandatory funding, that means that that funding has to be made available every year that that farm bill is in effect. So there is a baseline dollar amount that is allocated out to purchase food. And when I say purchase food, that means the federal government through the Department of Agriculture, so USDA, purchases food nationally, and then in turn distributes that food out through the TEFAP network. Bonus commodities are slightly different. That's bonus funding that is at the discretion of the Secretary of Agriculture. It's referred to as Section 42 funding as well. So the way that funding works is the Secretary of Agriculture has the option of stepping in and making a purchase to help stabilize an agriculture market. So an example I always like to give is apples. So let's say that one year there is a bumper crop of apples. There are too many apples, which means the price of apples at the grocery store is dropping. So to stabilize that price in that market, the Secretary of Agriculture can step in on behalf of the federal government and make a significant purchase of apples. So what happens to those apples? They come through TEFAP, and it could be in the form of fresh apples, applesauce, apple juice, things like that. So it's a win-win scenario. It's helping the growers of apples, it's helping the producers who are manufacturing those into different products, and it's benefiting food banks and our network of emergency food programs who are helping to get those foods out into the hands of people that need it. And then additionally, the third piece is that administrative component, which I already touched upon a little bit. So those are actual dollars that help to offset the storage and distribution costs that we take on as a TEFAP contract holder. So in the most recent Farm Bill, the last one, there were some significant changes to the program funding levels for TEFAP. So it increased those mandatory dollars that I talked about. And then also some changes to how surplus commodities are distributed and some other regulations. So now we're going to get into how this whole process actually unfolds. So just as a refresher, this is a federal piece of legislation, so we're talking about Congress down in Washington, D.C. And within Congress, you have the House of Representatives, and then you have the Senate. And each chamber has their own committees that oversee specific legislation. So the Farm Bill falls under the Agriculture Committee. So in the Senate, it's the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee, and then in the House, it's the House Committee on Agriculture. So both of those committees have jurisdiction over this legislation. So leading up to the Farm Bill, these committees will conduct hearings. So those hearings typically take place in Washington, but they will also sometimes do field hearings. So those will take place in a couple of states across the country, usually in states where there's a member on the committee who represents that area. So those hearings take place. It's an opportunity for stakeholders to share their input on what they want to see in the next Farm Bill. And this whole process usually takes place at least the year before the bill is due, as well as the year of. So we've been participating in various hearings and field hearings over the last year and a half. Let's see. So along with that hearing process, a key component of the committee responsibilities are working with the office staff of the members. So making sure that they are aware of what this whole process entails and what the responsibilities are of that staff. And then finally, they work on writing the pieces of legislation that actually turn into the final bill. So I just wanted to share a flow chart to really walk you through the rest of the process. So we explained how the committee functions, and then this is how that committee process turns into an actual piece of legislation. So on the left side of the chart, you'll see I have it outlined from the House side, and then on the right side, we have the Senate. And then we also have our fun little bill from Schoolhouse Rock that explains this whole process as well. So currently what's happening right now is the committees are working on drafting their legislation. So we're still at that top level of the boxes. Neither of those bills have been released yet. But they've taken all the feedback that they've been hearing through these different hearings, as well as the feedback that they're hearing from members who aren't on the committee, and gathering through all those comments, sifting through them, and trying to piece together what the next Farm Bill is going to look like. So once they release their bill in the committee, it has to get marked up, and then the committee votes on it. So once the committee votes on it, it gets released from committee to go to the floor for consideration. So that would be the next step. So it would go to the floor vote, and then once the floor vote takes place, and this is assuming that it passes, it would go to conference. So the conference committee process does not take place until both the House and the Senate have released their bills. The whole point of the conference committee is that they have to reconcile what the differences are between those two bills. So that's where they say, all right, the House wants to do this, the Senate wants to do that. How do we make this work? Because the final legislation has to be the same in both chambers. The conference committee process is pretty interesting. It can consist of members who were on the ag committees, and it can consist of members who aren't. So those members are identified by the leadership. And then they're the ones who really work to resolve all of those differences and bring a unified bill. So once the conference committee releases their legislation, it goes back to the House and then back to the Senate. They both vote, assuming that this all goes well. They've both passed the identical piece of legislation. That's when it reaches the final stage of going to the president for signature, and that's when the bill becomes a law. There's a lot of other stuff that happens during this whole process. There are pieces of legislation called marker bills, which are never intended to be voted on, but are essentially messaging documents, identifying different priorities and interests in the hopes that they're considered in the final legislation. And there's no guarantee that it operates as smoothly as this chart makes it look. And I'll use the last Farm Bill as an example in the House. So the House Ag Committee passed an initial piece of legislation. It went to the House floor for a vote. That proposed Farm Bill in 2017 would have been devastating to SNAP. There were a lot of harmful provisions in there that would have reduced access. So it went to the floor, and when it went to the floor for a vote, it failed. So it had to go back to committee and be revised, and then that process started all over again. So it never operates as smoothly as this chart shows, but I just wanted to make sure you had a general idea of all of the stages and what a long process this really is. And just as a reminder again, we still have not seen the proposed legislation announced in either the House or the Senate. So within the Farm Bill, there's two different types of funding. And I wanted to make sure that we spend a little bit of time on this so you had a better handle on what this all looks like. So there's mandatory funding and there's discretionary funding. I know there's a lot of text on the slide. Usually I like to keep it pretty simple, but I wanted to make sure that you had this information. So with mandatory funding, if that is included in the legislation, that means that Congress is obligated to fund those programs at that level. Discretionary funding means that Congress has the discretion to fund those programs at that level. So they have the option to fund it at what's suggested or not fund it at what's suggested. So again, mandatory means it's required to be funded at that level. Discretionary means it's not. So an example of that, I'm going to circle back to that TEFAP funding that we were talking about earlier. Those dollars, the administrative dollars that help to offset storage and distribution, that is authorized in the Farm Bill at $100 million annually. So that means when they were drafting the last Farm Bill, they said this is a fair dollar amount. This is what we suggest Congress fund this at. There is no guarantee that it will be funded excuse me, at that $100 million level until you go through the appropriations process. So the appropriations process is the budget process. So that's where Congress actually writes the check to make sure that the funding is allocated out. So that $100 million that TEFAP admin is authorized at has never been funded at $100 million. We've been making incremental progress on that. In the most recent budget, it was funded at 92 million, but we've never gotten to 100. So that's the difference between mandatory and discretionary. So what happens if a Farm Bill doesn't pass? This is something that typically pops up in the media when we start getting close to the Farm Bill expiration date. And it usually comes up when they're talking about milk and the price of milk. So SNAP and crop insurance are funded by that mandatory funding, so they would continue. There would be no disruptions to that. But other programs would not continue, including nutrition programs, ag support, and conservation programs. And then that price of milk piece that I was referring to falls within that price support that would revert back to a really old agriculture policy. I think that was established in 1940, maybe earlier than 1940. So all of this to say, the bottom line is nobody wants the Farm Bill to fail or to not be renewed. I don't believe that's ever happened. What they would do is pass an extension. So they would, give themselves an extension like you're asking for an extension on a term paper in college. So it kind of pushes the deadline out so things operate as is until they can get a bill passed. And this has happened in recent history. The 2012 Farm Bill, which ended up being the 2014 Farm Bill. That was a long one. It took a while to really negotiate and get that final bill across the finish line. So where are we at with the timeline and what are we looking at in terms of potential scenarios? So I just wanted to start with January of this calendar year, even though we've been talking about the Farm Bill for well over a year now. So we had the 118th Congress started in January, and then in June we had the Fiscal Responsibility Act pass. So what that did was establish funding levels and baseline funding levels, but that did also have some impacts on SNAP. So there were some changes to SNAP that happened outside of the Farm Bill. Going into September, this is when we hit that expiration date for the Farm Bill. So in theory, the Farm Bill is set to expire on September 30th of this year. And then simultaneously, the federal government is due to pass their spending bills by September 30th, 2023, because the federal fiscal year starts on October 1st. There is essentially no chance of a farm bill being passed by then. So we expect an extension, and we expect them to probably vote on that in early September. Excuse me. Most members of Congress have said that they need to pass the appropriations bills, so those funding bills for the budget. They need to handle that before they get to the Farm Bill. So we will see what happens in terms of that timeline on government funding, and then how that translates to the impact on what we're looking at in terms of timing for the Farm Bill. There is a potential that we could see a Farm Bill by the end of this year, but that is still pretty unlikely. So the second session of Congress begins in January, and then also going into 2024, it's an election year, and it's also a general election year, so it's a bigger one. So anytime there's an election year, it's kind of harder or more difficult to get big legislation like the Farm Bill passed, but there's also greater urgency because folks want to campaign on any successes that they were able to achieve in the bill. So it is very likely that we will see a bill passed before February of next year. And then there's just some other things I wanted to highlight or just share with you as to what the rest of that calendar year looks like. So what's next? Now is when we really need to start taking action. So this is why I wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity today to really go over the real basics of the Farm Bill, what it's involving, and then that way you have that knowledge as I start reaching out to you more about what we need to be doing. So August recess starts shortly. Looking at my congressional calendar now, and the last day that our elected representatives are scheduled to be in Washington is Friday, July 28th. And then they will be heading home, and they will be in district, and they will be in district for the entire month of August before returning to Washington the first week of September. So this is an opportunity where you may see your elected official out and about at different events in the community. And it's a chance for you to say and advocate around your support of the Farm Bill. You can let them know that you work at a food pantry or a soup kitchen and what your program has been seeing, and say how important SNAP and USDA commodities are to making sure that the folks that you're serving are able to make ends meet. The next piece is we're waiting to see what's going to come out of the House and the Senate. And once we see what those bills look like, then we'll know better how to act on that. So it may be me asking you to reach out and thank them for their support of our programs in the legislation, and encourage them to vote yes. Or it could be, you know, if there's the potential of seeing a bill come out of the House that has some changes to SNAP that we're not comfortable with, it could be asking you to ask your member to vote no, and to work on better language in that legislation. Additionally, we're participating with Feeding New York State on a petition around strengthening TEFAP and SNAP in the Farm Bill. So there is a QR code on the slide that links to that petition. So it's real fast. All you have to do is put in your information. You can change some of the language in the message field, and it will get messages out to your elected officials based on your address. So it's very easy, and you can share that out. And I will be also sharing this that link with you in different communications. I strongly encourage you, if you aren't already, to be following our social media. A lot of things happen very quickly as this bill moves forward. So there may be last minute alerts and last minute information that we're sharing on our social media channels. So please keep an eye on that. And additionally, make sure that you're reading and checking all of your communications that are coming through the food bank, because you will be hearing from me much more frequently, particularly around this farm bill. And with that, I wanted to share a couple of exciting announcements. So if you want to learn more, you have questions, starting in August at the advice and encouragement of some program coordinators, I will be doing an advocacy newsletter. We have not done this in several years, but I'm going to give it another shot and see if we get better engagement that way. So the goal is to do a monthly newsletter, and then I will do alerts if we have more things are happening quickly, and I want to make sure that you're up to date. That newsletter will have a lot of information in it that I hope is helpful to you. So I will appreciate any feedback that you want to give on that. If there's things that aren't included in there that you want to know more about. But I want to make sure that you're aware of what's happening and what you can do and how you can advocate around this legislation. And make sure that these programs are strengthened in the bill. Additionally, I'm also going to try something called office hours. Feeding America has done this with their advocacy team, and I have taken advantage of it to learn more about specific legislation that I tend to struggle with. So for example, I will say, honestly, I am not good with tax law. I have taken advantage of their office hours. So the way this would work is on a specific date, I will block out time that I am available, and you can schedule to meet with me, whether it's a phone call or a virtual meeting. If you have any questions, so after this webinar, if there are things that you want to know more about that I didn't cover or that we don't get to in the Q&A, or if you're just more comfortable having that one-on-one conversation, I'm here for you. So I will outline the specific times on those dates that I will be available in the first advocacy newsletter. So you would just contact me to sign up so that we could get that scheduled and make sure that I have that blocked out for you. But I do have 3 dates that I'm going to start this in August. So I tried to mix up the dates just in case there are certain days that work better for you than others. So I'm looking at Thursday, August 10th, Wednesday, August 16th, and Tuesday, August 22nd. So again, just please keep in mind with these advocacy office hours that it is specifically about advocacy. I unfortunately can't answer questions around our food inventory or some very specific agency relations questions for you. If you do have them, I can put you in touch with the right person. But the intent of these office hours is to be very focused on advocacy and policy and things like that that I might be able to help you with. So I have my contact information here on the slide as well, if you don't already have that. And with that, I'm going to take a pause and try to figure out how I can find the Q&A because I lost a lot of things when I started sharing. So I apologize if folks had good questions along the way that I missed.
I can read the questions if there's
Okay,
nothing in the Q&A right now.
Yeah.
There's a couple in the chat. I can read them out if that's easier.
Yeah, thank you, Brian.
Yeah, no problem. We had a question, is there any handouts that people can print?
Yeah, so just, are you looking for,
Joanne,
you looking for, sorry.
Jody, sorry, I think, hold on, sorry.
Jody? Jody, if
Jody.
you could just elaborate on what kind of handouts you're looking for. So if you're looking for just general information about the Farm Bill or the programs, or are you looking for handouts around like links to the petition and things that you can post at your agency? I'm hoping to have all of that available for you and including links to stuff in that advocacy newsletter. But I just want to make sure that I definitely have what you're looking for.
Yeah, they're looking for, looks like materials for folks that they encounter and things to post at their sites. So
okay, yeah, definitely.
The next one was from Murray. Are any of our House and/or Senate members on the agricultural committees?
Yes, that's a great question, Murray. Thank you for bringing that up. So within the food bank service area, we have obviously our 2 senators. So that's Senator Gillibrand and Senator Schumer. And then within the House of Representatives, we've got 4 members whose districts overlap with the food bank service area. So we have Congresswoman Stefanik, we have Congresswoman Tenney, we have Congressman Williams, and then we have Congressman Molinaro. So Congressman Molinaro is on the House Agriculture Committee, and then Senator Gillibrand is on the Senate Agriculture Committee. So we do in fact have 2 members who are on the committees of jurisdiction. So that is a great question.
Just a comment, Terry said just sent the letter from the QR code. It was super easy, so great.
Great. Thank you.
Martha wanted to know if the PowerPoint slides would be available.
Yeah, we can certainly make these available.
Yeah, I think
and
we'll
then
post.
Also we're recording.
Yeah, we're going to post a copy of this webinar on the registration page, and I'm sure we can post a copy of a PDF copy of the slides on there as well. So, Melissa said, I sometimes get pushback on advocacy about the losing not-for-profit status. Can you expand how that works?
Sure. So there is a lot of concern that some folks have around advocacy versus lobbying, and that is very important. As a 501c3, you have to be careful about what you're doing and saying in terms of lobbying. The most restrictions fall around election year activities and what you can and cannot say when it involves commentary on an elected official. So the easiest thing to do and the easiest way to frame this is that you are absolutely 100%, even as a nonprofit, because the food bank is a nonprofit, you are allowed to advocate and you are allowed to lobby. The distinguishing factor is so long as your salary is not paid for with government dollars. So for example, my salary at the food bank is not funded through the government. It is funded through the food bank's revenue. So that allows me to lobby on behalf of these dollars. So the big thing is when you are lobbying, stick to the legislation and stick to the policy and stick to the programs. Just don't give opinions on specific elected officials or like I said, the biggest restraint is around election year activity. So for example, I can't endorse a candidate. I can't say, oh, I really hope this person wins whatever office. That would be great for us. That is not permissible activity. So that tends to be the big caveat. You have to stay away from that type of activity. So it does get dicey, I will admit. We're going into the election year has already started, even though it's not 2024 yet. So we have several candidates that have already announced that they're running for specific offices. So if the food bank engages with them directly, then I need to make sure that we also engage with the other candidates and make sure that they have equal access. But you are absolutely allowed to advocate on behalf of TEFAP and advocate on behalf of SNAP and say that these programs are vital to your day-to-day work and your mission of making sure that folks have access to food. I'm happy to share additional resources if I can't remember if you said who asked that question, but there are a lot of good resources out there. And again, I always want to give the caveat, I'm not an attorney, so I can't give you legal advice, but I can point you in the direction of some really good resources online that really lay out specifically what you can and can't do. One organization is called Boulder Advocacy. I highly recommend them in visiting that website. They have some really great templates and resources and FAQs that you can access. I hope that answered their question.
Great. Looks like we had one more question. I'm not sure. I think what Martha's asking, can you share what congressman is on the Ag Committee? I think that's what she's asking. Maybe she didn't catch
Which member of Congress?
I think that's what she's asking.
Okay. So the member of Congress that their district overlaps with our service area that is on the Ag Committee is Congressman Molinaro. And I don't think you can see my lovely map. So Congressman Molinaro serves like the southern tier of New York State. So within the food bank service area, he has all of Cortland County and all of Shenango County. So those are the only 2 counties that he overlaps with. But then we also have Senator Gillibrand, who obviously covers all of New York State, and she is on the Senate Ag Committee, and she has been a huge advocate and huge proponent of addressing hunger, and really a true asset for our mission and our priorities on the Agriculture Committee.
One more question. Looks like, are there any current issues at the state level that we should be aware of?
Currently on the state level, no, not at this point. Right now, I will be honest, what you're going to be hearing the most about from me is federal. So it's really going to be the Farm Bill. And then I'll just plant that little teaser that you're going to be hearing from me about the federal budget. There's a lot of opportunity for advocacy within the budget. And they're both occurring at the same time. And we know that the budget has the biggest priority to get passed from Congress, because we don't want a government shutdown. So there will be opportunities within the that process for you to advocate. But I would say, you know, you're going to be seeing a lot of posts from us in August. In particular, we're going to really kick off our Farm Bill activities with different action steps that you can take. So if you are following us on our social media channels, you can share those out to your network. I will also be sending out different communications to you along the way, encouraging you to share out that petition that I had the QR code for. So, you know, if you want to post materials at your agency, encouraging the folks who are there to take action, this would all be wonderful. The more people who are voicing their support for these programs, the better. As I mentioned, this is only once every 5 years, and it's a massive opportunity for us to make really fundamental change. You all have seen the fluctuations in USDA commodities that are available on the menu, and that is the vast majority of that is dictated by the Farm Bill. So if we want to continue seeing a higher level of those commodities, we need to advocate for that funding. We need to make sure that those mandatory dollars are written into the legislation, so we know that we've got that moving forward. And we really, truly need to make sure that SNAP is protected and strengthened, and that it's not attacked, and that we're not seeing folks lose access to those really, really important benefits. So there is going to be a lot of opportunity for you to make some, you know, fundamental, I try to keep the action alerts very simple and very easy and really quick for you to do, but I can't minimize I can't say enough just how much your voice has an impact. The last time we pushed out a petition, we did not get as massive of a response as we wanted to see within our service area, but some of the other food banks had a pretty big response rate, and we know that had an impact. We heard from legislators saying, you know, I heard from, you know, so many constituents saying that, you know, this program is important to them. So it may seem like a really small step just by signing that petition, but it does make a difference. So I don't want you to think that it has to be, you know, a face-to-face meeting with a member of Congress or a phone call even. The phone calls are fantastic, but, you know, if you only have a couple of minutes to do the petition, that's good. That's great.
We had a couple more questions that came in. Yes, somebody said, isn't September Food Insecurity Month? It's actually Hunger Action Month, the month of September. Martha wanted to know, can you include a sample type message that we can share with others to contact our Congress people with? Yeah,
so within that petition, there is sample language within there that folks can just work off of for doing that petition. But if you're looking for some sample language for making phone calls, I'd be happy to put something like that together.
And Terry said, when you send the letter from the QR code, there's an opportunity to share on Facebook and I think Twitter. So yes, I think you can share. I know you can share on Facebook for sure.
Yep.
And then Martha had a question about doing a postcard, a mailer maybe to Congress.
I would advise against doing actual physical mail. Going to Washington, ever since the anthrax scare or the anthrax attack that happened in the early 2000s, they no longer get physical mail. So all of the mail that goes to your member of Congress in Washington goes to a separate facility. It gets opened, it gets processed, it gets scanned, and then it gets emailed to those offices. So really, my suggestion would be an email. So doing one of these petitions or their general emails are posted on all of their websites, or a phone call. But I would definitely stay away from doing paper mail. Any other questions? And I'll just share before we wrap up too that I know I focused pretty heavy on August in terms of what we're going to be doing because that's our big kickoff. But I did also want to share that in September, Karen Belcher and I will be going down to Washington along with hundreds of other advocates across the country to do lobby visits in DC on Capitol Hill, specifically around the Farm Bill. And that's taking place right before the agency conference. So hopefully we have some exciting news to share with you during the conference about, what we learned in Washington, what we heard, what we were able to share, and then give you all some next steps that you'll be able to take around the Farm Bill. Last call for questions before we end. We still have 15 minutes left, so you either get 15 minutes back of your day or we got 15 more minutes to answer questions. Any more come in, Brian?
One came in. Martha said, any wild bus road trips to DC to meet with.
I like where you're thinking, Martha. If you've got money for it, we could figure something out. I will say DC is a very expensive city to travel to. All right, well, if you have anything that you thought of, please feel free to reach out to me. And again, keep an eye out for that first advocacy newsletter that will be coming out in August. And I hope that has a lot of helpful information. Please share any feedback. And I always want to reinforce to you that I am a resource for you. I'm here to help you out. So if you have questions about legislation or next steps or things that you can be doing on behalf of your program, or the individuals and families that you're serving, I'm here to help you strategize around that and give you some tips and pointers and materials. That's what I'm here for. So don't hesitate to contact me. So thanks again, everybody, for taking the time out of your afternoon today to join me. And I hope this was helpful. Take care.